right, it's my honor to introduce our keynote speaker for this session, the disability rights movement and the role of Spina Bifida advocates in creating change. Be presented by Mr. John Kemp. He's a president and CEO of the Lakeshore Foundation, which is an internationally recognized foundation that provides opportunities for individuals with chronic illnesses and physical disabilities to lead healthy and active independent lives. In addition to that, he is the co-founder for the American Association for People with Disabilities, and not to mention a world-renowned disability rights activist. Finally, he's an author and having published his latest widely acclaimed book, Disability Friendly: How to Move from Clueless to Inclusive, back in October of 2022. Please join me in welcoming Mr. John Kemp.
Thank you. Thank you, Will, very much. I appreciate the opportunity that you have provided me. And my relationship with the Spina Bifida Association of America goes back 20, 30 years. Sarah and I have been friends. Even my wife and Sarah know each other. And I spoke years ago at one of your national conferences as well. So it's great to be back with you. And I have nothing but admiration and respect for your leadership and for the role of having the issues of people with spina bifida brought to the fore, brought to the Hill, brought to the White House, and especially brought to all of you and all of us in the disability movement across the entire network of organizations and individuals with various disabilities. So thank you very much for the invitation. It's a real honor and a privilege. I have no slides, so you can either be happy about that or you're going to be, hopefully not too wondering what's coming next. What am I going to talk about? But I will just say I have some thoughts that I would like to share with you. I have reviewed your strategic plan. I would like to talk a little bit about disability culture, and then you are about to be sent up to the Hill, Teal on the Hill, and make some comments about that. I will do my best to just give you some of my experiences of guiding organizations and individuals with disabilities as they go up to the Hill. I know you are well prepared for your legislative visits, and you've got your packets, and you've got your colors, and you've got your identification. So it's going to be incredibly important and probably very, very powerful to be able to be meeting the policymakers. I will say that don't be shocked if there are a lot of 22-year-olds that you're going to talk to, and young professionals who are working there. Sometimes it's a little disarming, so to speak. But I will say that they do very well in briefing the member of Congress. And if anything, they're collecting your data and creating a file that they can go to and resource. So it's all worth it in the long run to be sure to build their library about spina bifida and the association. I thought I would just start by saying belonging isn't just a human need. It's a right. Belonging is grounded on 4 P's. 4 P's: people, place, power, and purpose. Belonging comes through our relationships with other people, as well as through our rootedness in nature, our ability to influence social, political, and economic decision-making, and our capacity to find shared meaning and purpose in our lives. So please always feel that you rightfully belong in this world, doing what you're doing, and that when you are excluded unfairly from the ability to participate, then you have every right to object in meaningful and appropriate ways. I don't want people to be timid. I don't like people who are timid, and I want so much to make sure that you tell your stories yourselves. People will, on the Hill and as you go around the country and in your communities around the country, they remember stories very well. They remember individual stories and they connect them with you and SBAA. In looking at your strategic plan, I loved it. I thought it was divided well into external and internal priorities. And under external, you'll have greater access to quality healthcare providers, equipment, medications, and supplies. And that is a great priority. There is not enough money in the system right now, and I know you have an ask for more funding from CDC, and rightfully so. But making that a #1 priority is great. People with spina bifida, their families and care partners will be better connected to one another for support, education, and access to resources. You know, sometimes it is difficult to find fellowship and purpose, and you need each other very much to make sure that you feel like you are properly emotionally supported and that you're going about your work, your advocacy, and seeking greater funding by having fellowship and partnership with others, that you are belonging. We need each other in this movement, and it's not just people with spina bifida needing other people with spina bifida. It is all people with disabilities needing each other very much. So hopefully you are getting that. You'll have access to better quality, more comprehensive community-centered research and data. I used to think that research was sort of not as high a priority as it is, but as I have come to Lakeshore in the last couple of years, and we do a lot of research about people with disabilities and the quality of lives, it is really critical that we have the documentation to be able to show policymakers and people who are implementing the policies that we know what we're talking about, that it's rooted in evidence, and this is not just wild dreams that we are coming up with at all. Your 5th priority is federal and state policymakers and potential investors will have increased understanding of spina bifida as a rare condition. I think you have to keep reminding people over and over about what is spina bifida, how do people live with spina bifida, and how do they live meaningful lives. All too often, we just take for granted that people understand our language and our words. So that is absolutely a great priority. And I love your internal priorities as well. Achieve greater alignment in your execution of your mission priorities and operations. We're going to be doing that exact same thing. Without a doubt, we are looking at doing a retreat here at Lakeshore, and we'll be talking about aligning ourselves not only with our mission, but making sure that our board and our staff are all aligned with what we are trying to accomplish. And we have a very broad agenda. This is Lakeshore, by the way, is a health, wellness, fitness, nutrition, research, and advocacy organization based in Birmingham, Alabama. We have 3,000 local members who come to our facility to work out, swim. They have to be people with disabilities and their household family members. And it is really important that people move and have exercise and have the necessary equipment to be able to do that. So we have universally designed fitness equipment. We have 3 basketball gyms. We have a football team, and we have the world number one ranked wheelchair rugby team going to the Paris Paralympics, and that is a big deal. Plus, we also have bocce. So we're very much about alignment and making sure that we're aligned with what we're trying to do. I want to take just another couple of minutes because the history of our disability rights movement is something that we all should understand and know. You may not need to know it as granularly as I'm going to present, and I will go fast. So you just can take your quick notes if you want, and I will send my notes to Michael Wood and Sarah so that they have this record. But in the US, our disability rights movement can be really pegged to about 1815, when the first formal deaf education began in the United States. Thomas Gallaudet founded the Connecticut Asylum for the Education and Instruction of Deaf and Dumb Persons. And I am using harsh language, but that is the language that was used at the time. But Gallaudet that this moved from Connecticut to DC, and the university, Gallaudet University, really started in the 1850s. But think back to 1815 to 17, when this Thomas Gallaudet, the same Gallaudet for which the university is named after, started a school. In 1919, Easter Seals was founded in Elyria, Ohio by Dr. Daddy Allen, who was an MD, and he saw a child injured in a streetcar accident and decided that that child needed rehabilitation and needed help in living a quality life after post-rehabilitation, post-discharge. And Easter Seals was born in 1919. In 1829, Braille was invented using raised point alphabet. That's not exactly what Braille is today, but it was first taught in 1860 at the St. Louis School for the Blind. Braille is declining in its use, but there are still about 30% of the population who are Braille users, and technology is now improving significantly access to the typed letters and words, and there are multiple platforms and multiple outputs that allow for typed words and printed words to be able to be understood by people who are blind. Eugenics, this is really the horrible part of our history, really horrible part. Eugenics sterilization laws were first enacted in Indiana in 1907, saying it was okay to sterilize people with disabilities who were confirmed idiots, imbeciles, and rapists, and who happened to reside in state institutions. So understand that that's how harsh our history is, that they would sterilize people with disabilities in state institutions simply because they had a disability. In a very short period of time, 24 other states adopted it, and by 1927, compulsory sterilization was ruled constitutional by the US Supreme Court. How horrific is that? Very horrific. In 1932, FDR was elected. Franklin Delano Roosevelt elected president, and nobody talked about his disability at all. In fact, he didn't want himself shown as a guy with paralysis below the waist, because he thought that it imparted a sign of weakness of the United States within the world and to the citizens of the United States. It was his decision to basically hide his disability. Even though there is a monument of him in his wheelchair in Washington, D.C., it is a telling point where he really helped start the March of Dimes and the National Federation for Infantile Paralysis. But that was 1932. From 34 to 40, the National Federation of the Blind was founded by Jacobus Tenbrook. That is very important. He was blind from the age of 14. So NFB was founded in those years. In 1935, the Social Security Act was signed into law, and that is really still alive and well today. It's a little outdated. In fact, it's very outdated in some of its requirements, like income asset tests and things like that, where they're people are limited to $3,000 in assets, and otherwise they don't qualify for certain thresholds. And they're now proposing to raise it up to $10,000. That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Still ridiculously low. $10,000 is not that much money, and people need to have and be able to retain some assets to live any kind of a decent life. In 1939, there was a Nazi program called Action T4, AKTION, capital T4, then the number 4, that killed up to 250,000 people with intellectual and physical disabilities systematically from 1939 to 1941, simply because of their disabilities. It is horrific. Hugh Gregory Gallagher. Hugh Gallagher's book, By Trust Betrayed, is an outstanding book that you should read if you are interested in the history of disability rights and the oppression that we had. But the Nazis, before they started killing Jewish people, decided that people with disabilities needed to go first. And they started killing huge numbers of people with disabilities simply because of their disability. The T4 Project, just remember that. And By Trust Betrayed is the name of the book. In 50, there were national barrier-free standards. In the National Mental Health Foundation was founded. In 47, the Employ the Physically Handicapped Week started in Washington, D.C. The President's Committee on Employment of the Handicapped was started. PVA was organized in 47. United Cerebral Palsy, which I was the executive director of for a number of years, out of Washington, D.C., was started in 48 by parents. In 50, the ARC, also championing people with intellectual disabilities, began. In 54, Brown versus Board of Education, and school segregation was abolished, and it gave permission to educate children with significant disabilities. ARC is great. And by the way, their new executive director is Katie Bay Neese. And Katie comes from Easter Seals Government Affairs Office. And she is a very good friend. She and I will say her husband, Ralph, are just two of the most extraordinary people. And I think you'll have an ally with the ARC and with Katie and with Ralph. So don't hesitate to contact Katie and get the ARC involved in any other projects that you want on a cross-disability basis. In 62, Ed Roberts fights for admission to the University of California at Berkeley. And Ed Roberts, of course, is the father of the independent living movement, along with Judy Heumann. The two of them, and was a sad day last year when Judy Heumann passed away, and Ed before her. But I am telling you, they started something that is unstoppable, and that is the freedom of people with disabilities to live independent lives. And we are going to carry that out every day as long as we're all together on this. In 63, the Community Mental Health Act was signed. In 64, the Civil Rights Act was passed, but it did not include people with disabilities. And it made no provisions for people with disabilities, which was a big mistake. But we just weren't well organized enough to be able to jump into that group of marginalized people who were specifically addressed in the Civil Rights Act of 64. In 65, Medicare and Medicaid passed. Unbelievably important laws. Medicaid assistance for people with disabilities and those with low income. Title 19. Most everybody with a disability who is unemployed is relying heavily upon this Title 19 for supports and services and for financial assistance. For health insurance primarily, is still alive and well, and hopefully it'll only grow. Obamacare was an expansion of it. I happen to live in Alabama, which refuses to expand Medicaid. It is difficult for me to have to talk about it, but it is really true. In 70, Judy Heumann was denied her teaching license in New York State, and she sued the New York City Board of Education and won. And she went on to be an assistant secretary in the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services at the U.S. Department of Education from 93 to 2001. She got him back. She made sure that she was not going to allow another qualified individual with a disability to be not denied the opportunity to be a teacher, which is incredible. She was told that she was a fire hazard, and she was, that was the rationale. Now, I will just give you a little personal story here and say, about 4 days ago, a basketball team of teenagers from Lakeshore went up to Murfreesboro, Tennessee to play basketball game, and went into a Big Daddy burger place as it was opening up for dinner. And they were told, 7 wheelchair users were told, that they constituted a fire hazard and that they refused to serve them and told them to leave. The Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Tennessee has now gotten hold of the case because one of our coaches called the newspaper and the press, a television station, and they came out and did an interview. And I so appreciate that comment in the chat. I like using our economic power to not provide people with resources who are going to discriminate against people with disabilities. In 73, Disabled in Action was founded in Philadelphia. And get this, in 74, the last ugly laws were repealed, and that was in Chicago, Illinois. So if somebody deemed you to be an ugly person, you could be removed from the streets of your city simply by your physical appearance, a disfigurement, they might call you, having a disfigurement. Totally arbitrary, totally wrong. And the last one was repealed in 1974. And in 75, the Developmental Disabilities Assistance and Bill of Rights Act was passed. The Education of All Handicapped Children's Act was passed. I'm using language from then. That became IDEA later on when they changed and updated the language. But just think about 75, the first right to an education, and in 78, the regulations took effect. They said that the federal government would pay for 40% of the education that school districts would have to pay to educate kids with disabilities. They have never met that threshold of 40%. They have started to increase the amount of money that they provide, but it's still not anywhere near what they promised at all. In 76, a deaf actress was cast in Sesame Street. Linda Beauvais, a graduate of Gallaudet and a veteran of the National Theater for the Deaf, played on Sesame Street. So we started to break into that. Pennhurst case, Haldeman versus Pennhurst in Pennsylvania, one of the first big cases that allowed for educating children as a civil right, a constitutional argument that was very critical. In 77, disability demonstrators occupied HEW offices in San Francisco. That was Judy Heumann. If you ever watch Crip Camp, and I hope everybody on this call has watched Crip Camp, they were occupying there was HEW, then they split HEW into Education and Health and Human Services, two different departments. But HEW was occupied for days by Judy and her colleagues in a nonviolent way. So you got to see Crip Camp. The National Council on Disability was established in 78. In 82, the United Nations encourages global equality and participation for people with disabilities. The National Organization on Disability in 82 was founded by Alan Reich, and NOD is still doing great work. A lot of it strictly focused on employment. That was very important. In 88, Gallaudet University still had never had a president who was deaf. Never had a president who was deaf. And they hired one more person who was not deaf. And the students and the faculty who are deaf and the community in Washington, D.C. and then around the country said, deaf president now. And they boycotted and marched on the university until the woman that was chosen from North Carolina to be the next president of Gallaudet University withdrew, went back to North Carolina to the university from which he came, and I. King Jordan was hired as their president and CEO. And he was as a deaf professor there at the university and was promoted to president and CEO. And that changed the whole world. He worked there from 88 until 2006 when he retired. And in 2019, I. King Jordan was appointed by President Barack Obama to serve on the Commission on Presidential Scholars. That was a very big deal. In 1990, ADA was passed. You hopefully know all the elements of the ADA. The Capitol crawl up the Supreme Court steps was part of the very visible activity that brought about the passage of the ADA, the coverage of it by the press. People were mortified. It's just incredible that it took something so visual like that people couldn't understand the discrimination until we got our ADA. It's amazing. So we got our ADA in 1990. It didn't take effect for a year, and then 2 years for some provisions. And it's time. I'm agreeing with the comments. We can raise that bar up a lot higher than it is right now, and we should. So I'm just going to jump over and say in 95, I helped start the American Association of People with Disabilities, AAPD, with Paul Hearn, who just was a remarkable advocate. He and I started in 95. He passed away in 98, and I love that guy. And I will forever, ever remember May 1st and honor him because he and I got this thing going, and it was just so important. It is thriving. Maria Town is the executive director or president CEO, and she has just done a fantastic job. And since she's taken over, she came from Houston. She's awesome. I will just jump over a couple of Assistive Technology Act in 98. Olmstead Supreme Court decision. Oh my gosh. Do you know how important that is, that you have the right to receive home and community-based services in the most integrated setting, and it reinforced our rights to live in the community and not just be so quickly put into an institution of sorts. 2 women, one of whom was last name was Olmstead. She has passed away since that time, but talk about courage. She had a lot of courage. Both of them had a lot of courage to go all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court agreed. In 2001, the Commonwealth of Virginia formally expresses regrets for their eugenics program. And thank God, between 1924 and 1979, they sterilized 8,000 people in Virginia, and they formally apologized for it. In 2004, Chicago held its first Disability Pride Parade. In 2007, the Road to Freedom toured around the country. Tom Olin took photographs. His exhibit is now a fundamental part of the history of the United States. Just incredible. In 2008, West Virginia requires disability history to be taught in the schools. It was the first state that required disability history to be taught in the schools. There are something like 36 states that now have that mandate. And I can't think of a better topic to talk about. And it's not about anything else. It should be in all 50 states. You're absolutely right. And it should be a fundamental part of how everybody grows up reading about disability rights, not just for our benefit as people with disabilities. It's for everyone else's benefit to know the history of that. Philadelphia did its Disability Pride Parade in 2012, and then I'll just say ADAPT activists fight to save the Affordable Care Act in 2017. What are some of the challenges in the last 7 years? Most recently, we've had the US Census rise up. And instead of the questions that they've asked that have identified us, and there are only 6 questions, there is so much that they were going to remove from the census, and it would have reduced the estimated population of people with disabilities from about 19 to 24%. That's the range. CDC I even think goes to 25% of the population having a disability, down to something like 12 or 13%. Why is this important? Because so much of our funding is tied to the percentage representation of people with disabilities to the total population. And allocation of federal money goes to states based on that type of ratio. We created so many comments, 12,000 comments back to the US Census Bureau, that they ended up saying, we're putting a halt to our changing of our questions. We're going to listen to the disability community and its concerns, and we are going to include their comments much more in our final rulemaking and in the final questions. I don't know where they're going to go with this, and I would say SBAA ought to be right on top of this one because it is critical that you stay on top of this. I know I will, and I see that you were very much a part of it. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, Mike. Okay, so when I think about how do we become independent, that's probably enough for the history. What's the most effective way for us to have independence? First of all, to have appropriate supports and services in our home, to get a job if we're qualified. I think that's, I think getting a job is like great and wonderful and probably the fastest way to an independent life. And we're not beholden to government to give us our health care and financial services and financial supports. But there are myths associated with the hiring. First one is people with disabilities are less productive. That's never been shown to be true. In fact, DuPont studies and other studies all throughout the last 30 years have shown that people with disabilities are actually, on the other end, more productive and more loyal in the way they go about their workforce participation. So that was just a big myth. And hopefully we're defeating it by having people with disabilities working every day. Second myth is we're too expensive to accommodate in the workplace. Are you kidding me? We employers accommodate non-disabled people every day. Every day. Oh, you want a light over here because you want to do a task over here and you need better lighting and the overhead lighting isn't very good. Oh, I'll get you a lamp right away. I need a 5-pronged chair so that I don't fall out of my chair and get hurt. They'll buy a chair right away for it. But no, because it's written into law as we have to have reasonable accommodations, it has become a contentious thing that a bunch of lawyers now make a lot of money arguing with the employers over. It has never been looked at as expensive. $500 is the average cost of an accommodation. And if you're a big shot, chief exec or something else, you may be entitled to even more of an investment than $500. And it would be very reasonable. It would be more like a small percentage of your overall salary. Third myth is hiring people with disabilities lowers the overall quality of the workforce. Ha, ha, ha. That is a bunch of nonsense. So hopefully we don't fall for any of these things. What are the benefits of inclusivity? Enhanced innovation. Enhanced innovation. We figure out how to get people with disabilities to be participating as consumers, as employees, as citizens, as voters, and we find solutions, innovative solutions to problems that they seem to think exist. This is something that we all can participate in, and we can all start businesses or provide our expertise to employers and to companies delivering goods and services on what is a better way to deliver services. Accommodations are extraordinary, and working remotely is certainly a very valuable accommodation if it can be tolerated by the employer. I will say that Lakeshore has a lot of hands-on kind of work, so to speak. We have to have people physically at our building, not everybody. So only a few people on our staff can benefit from remote working, but we allow remote working at least 2 days a week. And 1 day is usually the most, or the next level that we go to if we can afford them not to be here. But we're a direct service organization and we deliver services directly to people, and we have to have people physically present to be able to do that. So those are kind of the balancing. Another benefit is improved employee engagement. You have much more, in inclusive environments, you have much more participation in the decision-making and in the way in which work is accomplished. You expand the applicant pool is another benefit of inclusivity. Think about this. Say you have 20% of the population and you're just arbitrarily saying we're not hiring people with disabilities. So you just knocked out 20%. You put those 20% in the pool, and now you skim off the top, the very best people that you can hire. And that includes some very talented, very smart, very capable people with disabilities. So hopefully you have a better, broader, and a deeper talent pool by including people with disabilities. Better customer relations. If I understand who my customer is, I am going to be able to serve people better. And this is a very big deal. I think the whole notion of running away from DEIA is nonsense. No employer should run away from that, should avoid it. I think you have to know who your employees are. You have to know who your customers are. You have to know who you are soliciting money from, and you have to be able to be responsive to their particular needs. So that is very important. Don't buy this nonsense about, oh, we've gone too far. We've gone overboard on DEIA. No, you haven't. You haven't even touched the surface yet. There's so much to learn about all of us with disabilities and every other group that is a protected class member. So I'd like to talk a little bit about culture and identity, disability identity. Disability identity comes from the power that we have from our acceptance of our disability identity. Are you hiding out and trying to hide and pass and not identify as a person with a disability? Or do you feel proud about it? I can't hide my disability. I've got artificial arms. I've got artificial legs. My disability is very apparent. But if you have a hidden disability, I'd still be out and proud about my disability. It's harder for people with hidden disabilities to have other people understand what they're talking about, but it's not impossible at all. So disability identity is something that is critical. It used to be regarded as a weakness or an embarrassment to disclose that you had a disability. And people were always trying to fit in and pass as non-disabled individuals. Here's a really interesting factoid, all right? About half of the population of people with disabilities say they share a common disability identity, that they will identify with people with disabilities and as a person with a disability. Only half of the 60 million people with disabilities will say out loud that they have a disability and that they're proud of it. It's pretty hard to have a political movement and an economic movement when half of the people that you should be leading and who are hopefully following won't self-identify. Please, please be proud of who you are with your disability. It is really critical. And remember, 83% of Americans with disabilities acquired their disability after birth. You, as members of Spina Bifida associations around the country, and I are part of the 17% who were born with their disabilities. The 83% acquired their disability after birth. And I am telling you, I want you to be out and proud about your disability, even though you might, we all started. And we get these really silly questions. And I'm just going to say one that I think most of you will probably agree with. I will tell you, some people ask me, do you think it's easier in life if you acquired your disability through an accident or you were born with your disability? And I look at them like, are you nuts? Are you crazy? How in the world would I know how to answer that question? That is ridiculous. I am who I am the way I was born, and I understand my identity. Yes, I can see it be a very big challenge to understand that your identity has changed after a car accident, acquiring paralysis, anything else, but I can't imagine trying to answer that question. So I usually push back on that question pretty hard. Another theme to our identity is disability is and will always be a new phenomenon to most of us, the 83% and family members and others. Disability is always going to be new, and it's always going to be something that we have to talk about. Thirdly, disability now makes us proud. Hopefully you've seen the Marley Matlins, and you've seen the extraordinary actors on TV, and you've seen the political folks like Tammy Duckworth and Tony Coelho and other people in the political world. You've seen lots of folks with disabilities who are hopefully rising up to be taking their rightful places in society. And we are proud of who we are. And I hope you are proud of who you are. The rise of disability culture helps us all, and not just us with disabilities, helps everybody understand that we bring a new perspective and a different perspective to the way life is lived. Our political and economic power is being used to change how people with disabilities are viewed. Think about the ADA Amendments Act in 2008, the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, passed in the mid-2000, the aught years, 2006, and how it's been adopted almost throughout the world. It's incredible. It leads us to culture, our culture. Disability culture is not simply the shared experience of oppression. And we don't all walk around feeling like, oh, woe's me. Oh, I'm so burdened because I have a disability. We usually are saying, who put these steps in with concrete that's going to sit there for another 30 years? Oh my goodness. So most of us are saying, why are we so as a society not aware of including people with disabilities in all the things that are going on? The elements of our history include our emerging art and humor. Think about Chuck Close, who died a couple years ago. Think about David Peppian, who's in the Missoula Museum of Art, who acquired his disability in Vietnam and used a wheelchair for the rest of his life, but became an extraordinary painter. And in every painting that he painted, whether it's people riding horses, a scene of a farm, he always incorporated something about his disability in his art. You don't have to do that. You can be an artist with a disability and paint anything you want, or write any kind of music or poetry or anything you want. But the fact that you would take advantage of using the medium of art to include disability further educates and informs the public, which I think is just awesome, awesome, awesome. The elements of our culture also include the piecing together of our history. That's why disability history is so important. Our evolving language and symbols, our remarkably unified world views, beliefs, and values. Remember this, the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities is worldwide, and everybody is talking about disability culture now. And these are the elements of it, and our strategies for surviving and thriving. We can do well. We contribute to the quality of everyone's life. The most compelling evidence of a disability culture is the vitality and the universality of these elements despite generations of crushing poverty. Believe me, we're forced into poverty. Have to spend down to qualify for Social Security so you can get Medicaid. Really, isn't that oppressive? It sure is. Social isolation, lack of education. And I will say this about education. In the one period of time in history, we are at a most unusual time in history where there are more students now who have gotten through high school and even college, students with disabilities who have now gotten through high school and college and are unemployed than at any other time in our history of our country. That is a lot of frustration. That is a lot of anger. People don't appreciate and like the fact that we thought we were going to participate in the American dream. If I go to school, if I graduate from high school, if I graduate from college, if I go on to get an advanced degree, I will be prepared to go into the workplace and I will get a job. No, you're going to get discriminated against. That's unfortunately what's happening in the world of work. And only enlightened employers are starting to figure out this phenomenon, which is a terrible one. What are the core values of our disability culture? One, a heightened acceptance of human differences, whether they be racial, economic, or even class. What do I mean by this? I'm talking about us folks with disabilities, all of you who have spina bifida, all right? Every day somebody says something to you that points out your limitations, your disability, your difference, right? So how do you feel about other people who are different from you? Whether it be skin color, gender, ability, educational status. We better be the most accepting and tolerant group of people on this earth among all people. Because if we're not, we are committing the same discrimination and the failure to accept as other non-disabled individuals. I think our disability enlightens us and makes us so aware of human differences that we respect the inclusion of all people. Second core value, interdependence is part of our life. Nobody ever asked me to help them move their furniture when I was in college. Can you imagine all the scratches I put on all the furniture? I got out of that. But I also knew that it was my responsibility to help other people in ways that I could help them. If I needed to write a letter, speak up, go to a meeting, do something that I can do to assist, I can't be a taker all the time. I cannot be a taker. We cannot be takers. We have to be able to give as well and do what we can. All right. So we cannot be just accepting help without saying thank you and what can I do for you in my way. Interdependence. Third one, a tolerance for lack of resolution in our lives. A tolerance for lack of resolution. How many times do you have to fill out forms and have to restate your disability and even sometimes staple a doctor's certificate? And how many times do we have to do this? This is every day. Almost every day we have to do something repetitively. So we just have to keep our act together and not blow our top and just go along with it and get it done. But I am telling you, this is a frustration that is beyond belief. Disability humor, part of our culture. We understand this, to find something absurdly hilarious in almost anything and everything we do. And I might have said this the last time I spoke, but I'll give you my one good story that I know can make it through the filters. So I'll just say I stopped into a restroom to do a quick bit of business, and the clamp on my right arm, and I'm holding up my arm and showing you my clamp, my prostheses. My clamp popped off my artificial arm and hit my shoe and bounced under and hit a guy's foot in the stall. Oh my gosh, I was so embarrassed. I was thinking, oh my gosh, is this over? And am I going to live through this? And I thought hours went by and it was only like 30 seconds. And I finally said, excuse me, could you give me a hand? And the guy was laughing and he said, oh my gosh. I said, I'll be there to help in just a second. So sometimes you can use humor effectively, but you can never use humor as self-deprecation. You cannot put yourself down to get a laugh out of somebody. Do not do that. All right. You've got to just keep your dignity about you and use humor the right way. The second last core value is a sophisticated future orientation. What do I mean? I mean, somebody says we're going to go to the Hill tomorrow and we're going to go visit offices of senators and members of Congress. And in your mind, you're thinking, what's the transportation going to be? Are the curb cuts in? The building's got to be accessible, so you don't have to worry about that. But in other places, you do have to use that future orientation where you literally go at about 1,000 miles an hour and you take the trip in your mind. Am I going to ever run into any barriers? And if so, how am I going to navigate around them? We do this every time. We think about where we're going when we find out and we talk about it. The last one is one that's very subtle, but I think everyone would agree. A core value is our ability to read others' attitudes and conflicts in order to sort out, fill in the gaps, and grasp the latent meaning in contradictory social messages. What do I mean? I mean that people say all the right words, but they talk really mamby-pamby. Isn't that special? And aren't you amazing? And it's all of that stuff that is going on. It's almost like they're patting you on the head, and it offends and it hurts. And I don't like it, and neither do you. So we learn to read these kinds of things. This is emotional intelligence. Dr. Daniel Goleman, who wrote a book on emotional intelligence. Get Dr. Daniel Goleman's book, Goleman. Get the first book he wrote. He's written many, now, Emotional Intelligence in the Workplace, and on and on and on. It is awesome. It is, when I read it, it was like, it's me. In it, he says research is proving that, say, violence prevention programs are far more effective when teaching core emotional competencies, impulse control, managing anger, and finding creative solutions to sticky social predicaments. Emotional Intelligence is the name of the book. Imagine having enough control not to fly off the handle every time somebody offended me or offended you because of disability. We gotta manage it. You can get upset, you can be confrontational, you can be educational, you can be informative, you can help a lot of people, but try to manage your impulses, because the first one will be, I'm angry. You don't always start right there. Don't start there. Got to manage your anger, and you got to find the creative solutions to sticky social predicaments. Emotional learning is ingrained. As experiences are repeated over and over, the brain itself reflects them as strengthened pathways, neural habits to apply in times of duress, frustration, and hurt. The outcome are decent human beings, and that's where we want to be. High IQ, it is estimated, is attributable to only about 20% of life's success. 20%, leaving 80% attributable to emotional intelligence, the ability to rein in our impulses, to read others' innermost feelings, and to handle relationships smoothly. We got to get along in this world. We need other people. They need us. So we've got to be able to figure out how to give them what they want without sacrificing our dignity and our self-respect. Aristotle said, it is a rare skill to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way. That's a lot to justify being really angry. With the right person, to the right degree, for the right purpose, at the right time, and in the right way. You get all those 5 things lined up, I think you can be angry. If those aren't lined up, then find another way to take on your activity. Let me close by saying advocacy is an activity by an individual or group that aims to influence decisions within the political, economic, and social institutions. You're going up on the hill. You're going to change the world. Types of advocacy, self-advocacy, starts with yourself. Starts with yourself. You are responsible for yourself first. Then you can advocate for someone else if you feel that they are, and they feel that they have been wronged and a right is due them. There are systems change advocacy, which is what SBAA is all about. There's legislative advocacy, which is SBAA is all about. And there is even legal advocacy, which SBAA may be about. But my advice is be mentally present tomorrow. Be mentally present. What do I mean? Be in the moment. Don't be looking at, this is the most beautiful office I have ever seen. This building is awesome. You only get 20 minutes. You only get 20 minutes max, probably, in your appointments the next 3 days. You got to get to the point. What is your well thought out ask or request? Lead with it. Give a compelling example that represents most of your constituency, if not all. One that possibly serves more people at the same or lower costs. Or it's a fundamental civil right where costs should not be a consideration. Go to the Hill and be respectfully firm with a specific ask or set of asks. Be direct and to the point. Offer to provide any lacked information. If somebody says, do you have any data that backs up that last statement you just made? And you say, yes, I'll get that for you right away. And you get it to them within 24 hours. And expect no more than 15 to 20 minutes at most, and get a photo op for sure. Get a photo op that you can use on your website, in your social media, and all of your e-newsletters. Now go be the teal on the hill and be successful. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you, John, so much. It's been truly a pleasure and honor to have you. What a way to kick off Teal on the Hill.